People everywhere have discovered that there's a bit more to the symbols around them. An unseen force steering the world, leaving its mark every place it touches. But if bound to material and reason alone, the logical mind immediately sees symbolism's big flaw. Take these, for instance. The countless pictures of politicians and various other celebrities throwing up what appear to be satanic gang signs. Now, if you think these pictures are all coincidence, I want you to turn off this video and go watch TV. Of course, this begs the question, surely the elite have better ways of identifying themselves to each other? Strategically speaking, hidden in plain sight doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why not lies in plain sight and leave the truth completely undocumented? Foolish, of course, but you can't own the world and be a bunch of fools, and you need more than cruelty to hijack the world. You need guidance. Their symbolism usually falls under one of two categories: predictive programming and hidden in plain sight. Predictive programming is a technique where people are exposed to a message that causes them to respond in a pre-programmed way to similar future events. Typically, there's a crisis, and that crisis, by the end of the movie, is resolved using certain means. When that event occurs in real life, the individual, although knowing this is real life as opposed to a movie, is inclined to respond similar to those who had been seen succeeding in the movie. You hear it all the time when somebody says, it's just like this movie or that movie, so it definitely has its effect. Then there's hidden in plain sight, the more mysterious of the two motives. Hidden in plain sight is more like taunting than a clever chess move. It involves putting symbols and messages out there, encrypted in such a way so that, if you're not looking for them, the meaning will fall below the threshold of your notice. The number of clues the Illuminati offer outsiders who know the hidden meaning of their symbols is needless, conspicuously needless. So, who stands to gain? Happy Feet is basically a retarded kids movie where a bunch of penguins seize upon every excuse possible to start dancing. First they dance, then they alienate the star of the movie, then they dance, then they find out their fish is disappearing, more dancing, then they find out the evil humans are destroying their environment, throw in some dancing, then they rebuild the Tower of Babel while dancing. And then the evil humans find out about the starving penguins and what they're doing to the environment.
So what's the problem?
Well, among other things, we are messing with their food chain.
And we have got to do something about it.
We suggest a ban on all marine harvesting.
Why should we do anything at all?
They're just a bunch of flightless birds at the bottom of the world.
Is equal to...
I don't want to live in a world without penguins.
So what are we going to do
We
about
gotta be
it?
the sheriff. Bang up the sign, no fishing.
UN gets involved. Meanwhile, in Penguin Land, more dancing, and alas, fish aplenty. So when the little slave larva is faced with a crisis, such as an environmental one, the first thing they'll think of is, this is a job for world government. I've seen it work before. Somewhere. In Independence Day, you have an unsuspecting population, a hostile alien invasion, and a military that can't seem to fight back. The entire human population is in disarray. It's finally decided that humanity's response must be unified and coordinated. They form a world government of sorts, in that they form a global command structure, find out the aliens' Achilles heel, and humanity is saved. Now, to its credit, Independence Day contains no dancing. There are, however, at least two layers of predictive programming. First, world government solves a problem. Fish aplenty. Secondly, it's eventually the plan of the elite to convince us into a bogus alien invasion, or perhaps a real one the Illuminati would rather avert. So this prepares us for that us against them mentality. In H.G. Wells' Things to Come, humanity has been decimated by war. Industry was thought to have ground to a halt, diseases everywhere, most if not all major cities lay in ruin. But a world government is forming in the background, hell-bent on destroying all sovereign states. Using advanced weapons like aircraft and poison gas, the world government pounds at rogue nations. Eventually, those pesky tin pot dictators are destroyed, and the new master race, together with a world government, march triumphantly into humanity's great new age. In the movie, it's progress this, progress that, painting national sovereignty as problematic and against progress. This is certainly an example of predictive programming. This movie, released in 1936, preceded World War II by only 3 years, and the formation of the United Nations by only 10. This movie was definitely meant to seed the mind with things to come. In Fight Club, a seemingly normal guy is living a double life. In one, a yuppie, in the other, a terrorist. His alter ego, Tyler Durden, is leading him into a world of extremism. carrying out acts of violence and terrorism, not for financial gain, but for ideological reasons. Eventually, the nameless main character would be tricked into rigging large financial buildings with explosives. Now, this is hidden in plain sight because the World Trade Center was brought down in a similar fashion, but it's predictive programming because it lends itself to the idea that such an act against a financial center was the work of extremists rather than the authorities. 300 is an excellent example of predictive programming, and hidden in plain sight if you have the right eyes. First, you have the King of Sparta, and an alternate history of Greece where shirts are illegal and all of Asia is sending its hordes of soldiers. You have the ruler of Persia, a black guy for some reason, and you even have the E4s, greedy, inbred black magicians who secretly rule over even the kings of Greece. Sound like anyone we know? So the Spartan king goes out to pick a fight with the Persians who appear determined to be helplessly impaled on one side, and the brave Spartan king with his elite fighting force on the other. Like heat-seeking missiles, wave after wave of Persians clamor desperately to be in the path of the sharpest sword possible. But alas, the Spartan king is defeated. Now it's no secret that the New World Order wants to move into Asia, but naturally it will face hordes of enemy soldiers. So it helps to have it implanted in the minds of people that a superior few can stand against the many. Yeah, the Arabs will just walk right into your spears, and if the Chinese give you any trouble, just push them off a cliff. They foster this idea because this is exactly what they're cooking up. John Carpenter's They Live starts off with Roddy Piper emerging from train tracks or a train station. If you've seen my first documentary, Hollywood Insider's Fallen Angels, you'll know that trains are symbolic for interdimensional travel. Roddy first just tries to get by in his new life, but eventually his curiosity would get the better of him. Soon he would realize that the world he lived in was false, and that there's non-human beings masquerading as ordinary people. He then tries to bring in his new, rather reluctant friend into this knowledge. They both set out to undo this conspiracy, eventually succeeding in a sacrificial way. This is an instance of hidden in plain sight, an uncomfortable truth mixed in with trivia and displayed to the masses. But this story of the quote-unquote vampire hunter is common, so if John Carpenter was making a savior out of Roddy, then it also is predictive programming. In The Matrix, a Messiah-like character called Neo learns his world is an illusion, and there's a war happening behind the scenes. After much trial and discovery, he eventually finds out he's the chosen one and defeats the machines. From a hidden in plain sight perspective, it reveals that the world the masses live in is imaginary. From a predictive programming point of view, it propagates the savior angle, the chosen one who will save humanity and undo the conspiracy. Demolition Man features Sylvester Stallone, who is unfrozen after decades in ice. He comes to find a world full of squares, ruled by a man who sabotages his own city in order to seize more control of it. Stallone, by the end, kills the guy and ends his tyranny. Demolition Man has it all. Retina scans, chips that control both buying and selling and can locate you anywhere, a strict police state where even reproduction is regulated, a leader that doubles as a religious leader who not only oversees secular but moral affairs as well, and even the inclusion of false flag terror, as the leader releases criminals to terrorize the city. From a hidden in plain sight perspective, it's a no-brainer, no symbology, only the literal future. From a predictive programming perspective, it reinforces this savior concept who will come and undo the conspiracy. The Man Who Would Be King is the Illuminati's favorite story, hands down. It tells the story of two Englishmen who go off to a distant primitive country intending on returning with loads of gold. When they arrive, they are mistaken for divine beings, rule, and eventually revealed to be only human and are punished. Since its only message is that the next one to arrive claiming to be God is a fraud, it doesn't do much in terms of predictive programming. But with Masonic and Illuminist symbolism unconcealed, it has hidden in plain sight written all over it. As synchronicities go, the most puzzling involve the terrorist attack on 9/11. Now, statistically speaking, some of these have to be coincidences, but others violate the odds outright. Over and over again, 9/11 appeared in everything from movies to comic books. And what about the FBI's failed attempt in 1993 to bring down Tower 1? Why did none of the artists see that as the future? Why did they universally envision the top of the buildings being damaged rather than the bottom? Did they know the first attack would fail? Was it insider knowledge? Or was it something more? Surely the 9/11 inside job plan isn't as old as 1976. With symbols, the Illuminati piss on every tree they pass, so how could they conceal the plan for so long? And if they did conceal the plan for so long, why did they even bother bombing Tower 1 in 93 if they knew it would fail and the tower's eventual destruction involved damage to the top? In my opinion, these synchronicities stem from one of two sources.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad that you could join us today for this Wednesday, July 25th, 2001 broadcast. And I'm going to put the call out that you call the White House and tell them, look, we've seen the news stories that you've wanted to blow things up, that you have blown things up, and that you're saying that 4 million of us are going to die and we need martial law and the Associated Press at one of your little drills you had. And that we're aware of who the terrorists are if you pull this. I want you to call these major newspapers. I want you to find out these statements were true by the White House about preparing for martial law. And I want you to let them know that if there is any terrorism, we know who to blame. The point is, if any terrorism comes, it's from this government. And if there was an outside threat like a bin Laden, who was a known CIA asset in the 80s, running the Mujahideen war, and whose family builds all the military bases over in Saudi Arabia right now, and sits on the board of Iridium Satellite, he's the boogeyman they need in this Orwellian phony system. I want the White House numbers up there now. A big part of this solution, after you research all the government terrorism and check out what I'm saying is true, call the White House and tell them, we know the government's planning terrorism. We know Oklahoma City and World Trade Center was terrorism. We know the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to blow up airliners, Baltimore Sun. If you do it, we're going to blame you because we know who's up to it. Or if you let some terrorist group do it, like the World Trade Center, we know who to blame. And you could save the planet.
Now, Alex Jones didn't have insider knowledge in the classical sense. He was just reading the trends. But here's an example of real insider knowledge.
What is Scenario 12D? We know it's a war game scenario, that it has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is that important enough to kill for?
Because it's no longer a game.
But if some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination?
Depends on who your terrorists are.
The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline?
There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction.
For what possible gain?
The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stockpile against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart bombed.
I can't believe it. This is about increasing arms sales.
Mm-hmm. This is Birdcage Liner. Wild-eyed crap right up there with Elvis as an alien and two-headed babies.
You obviously read it.
Don't be so damn naive.
You're absolutely sure that this is the targeted flight?
This flight was chosen primarily for its visibility. It's scheduled to pass over Manhattan on its way to Boston.
You said they intend to bring us down in the middle of New York City?
Fires. Your flight's gonna make an unscheduled stop in exactly 22 minutes.
The corner of Liberty and Washington. Lower Manhattan.
The World Trade Center. I'm going to crash the plane into the World Trade Center.
I'll tell the flight crew.
All right, try cutting electrical power.
You've thought of that. You've thought of everything.
New York Center, this is Atlantic National Flight 265 Heavy. We are declaring an emergency. We have 110 souls on board, 16,000 pounds of fuel.
We've got manual override.
The lone gunman ran in 2001.
That's right. 2000. It was a mid-season replacement, so we. Oh yeah, right. 2001. We shot in 2000. January 2001. We started airing.
When did you shoot the episode with the government secretly hijacking a jet by remote control to fly to the World Trade Center?
Yeah, that we shot in March of 2000.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, you see a plot from the TV show you were in, to some extent, coming true. Tell us in a nutshell what happened in that episode.
There is a government plot where they take a computer and basically override all the pilot's control systems, and by remote control are going to fly it into the World Trade Center in the series to start a worldwide war on terror, on terrorists.
So what do you think it is, or any ideas or feelings or thoughts on that? You know, what is it? Is it an inside track, a conspiracy with the writers, the lone gunmen? Or is it that they were tuned into the news? And, I mean, Tom Clancy
wrote it in his book, too, right? The interesting thing that I had heard, that this goes back before even Lionel Chetwynd, that Chris Carter was at a cocktail party, and he felt very out of place, and apparently he was in a tuxedo way in the corner, and this psychic came over to him and said, whatever you're working on is going to make you a ton of money. And that was just before he did the X-Files. Well, that psychic I talked to, I go, what were you doing at the Hollywood party? She goes, I was hired by the CIA to go to parties and then just go home and email what I talked about at people. So the CIA has been tracking Hollywood parties since the 80s in order to determine, because, you know, Hollywood films are a...
They set the agenda.
They set a foreign policy, sort of. I mean,
it's a projection. It's America's dominance. They admit a lot of it's Hollywood.
Right. And so they want to make sure that all the producers and the writers, that nobody's thinking anything so radical or doing a movie that will completely undermine their foreign policy plans. And that they do that through sending women to parties and having them email. It's the weirdest thing. It's kind of creepy. Everybody I tell in Hollywood, all my actor friends, are kind of freaked out about it.
This is Steve Jackson's card game, Illuminati, the game of conspiracy. From beginning to end, this deck reeks of insider info. The final goal of the game is, yep, you guessed it, none other than world domination, naturally. The sheer outlandishness of some of the cards desensitizes those outside of the know, but a deeper look reveals that there's not a single card in the deck that hasn't happened, isn't happening, or won't happen. Most of the cards depict a sinister brand of humor mixed in with knowledge of a deep insider. But we can't rule out the paranormal in this case. Steve Jackson, the game's creator, dabbles in magic. Steve Jackson, founder of Steve Jackson Games, owned a spin-off company called Illuminati Online, which eventually became a website hosting company whose servers were based in Austin, Texas. In 1990, the Secret Service raided Illuminati Online and ran off with their servers. After losing the case in federal court, the Secret Service was forced to return the servers and pay Illuminati Online $50,000. Then, in 1999, Wired magazine reports that a group of hackers broke into campaign website of then presidential hopeful George W. Bush, only to find out that George's website was hosted by none other than Steve Jackson's Illuminati Online. And while you try to contain your amazement, I'm going to analyze this guy's psychology. First, hosting your campaign website from Illuminati Online is completely unnecessary. Why not teddybears.com or praisejesus.org? It's not like other insiders need help identifying you. Your family has been calling for a New World Order since there was a New World Order. Just another example of them giving clues they needn't give. So, if not by insider info, then what's the other angle? The other angle is the paranormal. Most investigations involve evidence and no admissions, but this case is one full of admissions and no evidence. But if you had the chance to take full or partial credit for a great piece of creative work, which would you do? Now ask yourself why these people chose otherwise.
Robert Johnson is considered the king of the Delta blues. He's also considered the father of rock and roll. It is very significant that Johnson would be considered the father of rock and roll, as it is alleged that he had sold his soul to Satan in Clarksdale, Mississippi, in exchange for guitar-playing abilities and worldwide fame. It was after Johnson made his alleged pact with Satan that he became the king of the Delta blues. Blues master and Johnson's mentor, Son House, set up him before Johnson's transformation. He'd sit at our feet and played during the break, and such another racket you've never heard. Son House said he made the audiences mad with his racket. Son House went on to say of Johnson, before he made his alleged pact with Satan, that he was a talentless and even an irritating guitar player.
But he's followed me and Willie around on Saturday night, Willie Brown. And every time we stop for rest and sit at a little guitar over in the corner or something and go out to catch air, get the guitar and be trying to play it and be just noising the people, And the folks would come out and say, why don't some of y'all go in there and make that boy put that thing down, he's running us crazy. Finally, left, he run off from his father and mother. And he went over in Arkansas someplace. Well, he was gone about 6 to 8 months.
It was during this period of 6 to 8 months that it is said that he made his pact with Satan on the crossroads of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. Son House said that when Johnson returned after 6 to 8 months, everything changed as Johnson was transformed almost before their very eyes.
Then he come back. When he come back, me and Willie Brown was playing out there, and he walked in. He said, can I hit a look at you? I said, nah, don't come back with that, Robert. I said, you know the people don't want to hear that racket. He said, let them say what they want to say. I want you to see what I learned.
Son House said when he finished, all of our mouths were standing open. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Son House declared emphatically, quote, he sold his soul to the devil to play like that. He's not only declared to be the father of rock and roll, but the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame says that Robert Johnson stands at the crossroads of American music, much as a popular folk legend has it. He once stood at Mississippi Crossroads and sold his soul to the devil in exchange for guitar-playing powers. Incredibly, Robert Johnson went from a guitarist who couldn't play a lick in a matter of months to a guitarist who, like a medium, didn't even have to practice as he channeled music from the spirit world at will.
I never seen him have to practice anything like that. Never seen him sit down and learn a song. He already knew it.
Early this morning, ooh, he knocked upon my door, and I said, hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go.
Robert Johnson seems to have lived in great fear that Satan would come and finally collect his soul. This thought was communicated in songs like Hellhound on My Trail.
The hellhound on my trail.
Robert Johnson's love for Satan and hatred for God was so great that he was known to get drunk and curse and blaspheme God.
It seems Robert could outdrink anybody. He'd get drunk, start cursing God.
The hellhound that Johnson so feared would finally catch up with him at the early age of 27 to take his soul. Johnson seems to have gone insane just prior to his death, having fallen to the ground, barking and howling like a dog.
And they said he was crawling around, so they told me, he said, crawl around like a dog, so he was just howling, you know.
Said he crawled on his hands and knees and barked and howled like a dog before he died.
His fame killed him.
Black Sabbath was named after a satanic being that appeared to bass player Geezer Butler after he had already painted his house black and adorned it with upside-down crosses and depictions of Satan. This satanic being that appeared at the foot of Butler's bed is considered the fifth mystical member of Black Sabbath, who gave them the material for their first 3 albums. Ozzy Osbourne has admitted that he thinks that he is a vehicle being used by Satan, declaring, I don't know if I'm a medium for some outside source. Whatever it is, frankly, I hope it's not what I think. Satan.
I was getting into, not practicing, but reading a lot of spiritualism and black magic and white magic. And somebody gave Ozzy this old 16th century book of black magic, and it was all written in, I think it was Latin. And he brought it round to my flat because he knew that I was interested in books and magic and all that kind of thing. And I just got this really weird vibe off it. And I put it in this cupboard in the apartment that I was living in. And that night, I just like woke up suddenly and there was just like this black shape at the bottom of my bed. And it just vanished into thin air as I was staring at it. And I just had the thought, it's got to have something to do with this book that Ozzy brought round for me, and I like leapt out of bed, rushed to the cupboard to throw this book out, and the book was gone. And the next day I told Ozzy about it, and about 3 days after that we came up with our first song, Black Sabbath, and Ozzy just like related my experience in the lyrics.
Big black shape with eyes of fire, telling people their desire. Satan sitting there, he's smiling.
Is that when we were playing our first songs together, and especially our first the first 3 albums, for instance, we would literally show up in a room and it was almost as if the songs were already written. That stuff just comes from somewhere.
Ginger Baker, formerly of Clapton's group Cream, says of Cream, quote, "It happens to us quite often. It feels as though I'm not playing my instrument. Something else is playing it, and that same thing is playing all three of our instruments. That's what I mean when I say it's frightening sometimes. Maybe we'll all play the same phrase out of nowhere. It happens very often with us." Heavy metal's most popular group, Metallica, and a copy of Motorhead's Prince, make it clear as just to whom they have given their souls. Kurt Cobain desecrated churches by scrawling graffiti like "God is gay" on the walls. Just before Cobain made it big, he admitted his aspirations in declaring, quote, "I will get stoned and worship Satan." Alice Cooper has stated that he received his name Alice from a spirit he contacted at a seance. Alice Cooper has admitted the influences that this spirit has wielded upon him during performances. He has stated that the spirit, quote, partly takes over his actions and singing on stage. AC/DC guitarist Angus Young has also admitted to being possessed. He points out that the spirit manifests while he's performing on stage. He says, quote, "By the time we're halfway through the first number, someone else is steering me. I'm just along for the ride. I become possessed when I get on stage." Joni Mitchell, who is considered the queen of folk rock, also speaks of a spirit entity which has assisted her musical success. Time magazine reported, quote, "She deeply believes in a male muse named Art, who lends her his key to what she airily calls the shine of creativity." Meatloaf is yet another of one of the many rock artists who has admitted, quote, "When I go on stage, I get possessed." From all of this documentation, one gets the idea that if all the demons that were possessing all these different rock stars were cast out on the same day, the entire rock and roll industry would come tumbling down to the ground. Notice here how Harrison deceptively switches from Hallelujah to Hare Krishna in an effort to turn Christians to Krishna. According to the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu sacred book, Krishna identifies himself as, quote, "the Lord of Destruction, the Serpent of Eternity, the Prince of Demons." Eminem says of some of his fans, quote, "They're into hurting themselves. They're cult people, devil worshippers, who say I'm right next to Satan in their thoughts." Santana actually admitted that he is being used by a spirit that identified itself as Metatron. Metatron has been associated with the eye in the triangle in occult history. In occultist Aleister Crowley's teaching, the eye in the triangle represents Satan himself. Santana stated, quote, "I know it sounds New Age, but in my meditation, this entity, which is called Metatron, he said, we want to hook you back to the radio airwave frequency. We want to reach junior high schools, and universities. Once you reach them, because we are going to connect you with the best artists of the day, then we want you to present them with a new menu. Let them know that they themselves are multidimensional spirits with enormous possibilities and opportunities. We want you to present them with a new form of existence that transcends religion, politics, or the modus operandi of education today. This country was founded with the Bible in one hand and guns in the other." Carlos Santana said that these spirits, which as we shall see in a little bit, were actually devils, had supernaturally brought different musicians to him and worked in the musical arena to bring them all together for this Landside album appropriately called Supernatural. Santana said, "I heard this entity wanted me to know I would be hooked up with the right writers, musicians, and producers for the purpose of reaching high school and college kids, so my inner instructions were clear." He said that Eric Clapton wanted to know if he could play on the album. He said all the people who played on the record said that they had heard my music before I called them, or that I appeared to them in dreams or something. Santana said they knew what was coming before they got the call. Joe Cocker, like many other rock artists, has admitted that when he performs, something seizes control of his body. Van Halen's former frontman, David Lee Roth, didn't only sing about running with the devil. He also said in an interview about the assistance demonic beings give him when he goes on stage. David Lee Roth said, "I'm going to abandon my spirit to them," which is exactly what I attempt to do. You work yourself into that state, and you fall into the suffocation of the demon gods. Many think that bands like 311 are safe. Many of these bands mock Christianity and purport Crowley's satanic teaching. In fact, here on the inside cover of their album Transmitter, a closer look reveals Crowley's teaching. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Now, it would be extremely difficult to sing a song where sentences, and in Led Zeppelin's case, a whole paragraph is grammatically correct both forward and backwards. My guess is this is an example of a muse singing and not a human. But the music industry isn't alone. For example, here's Alan Moore, the original author of the much analyzed movie V for Vendetta.
Alan Moore, who wrote the books that these movies are based upon, Alan Moore is actually a practitioner of Satanist Aleister Crowley's black magic. Moore has stated, quote, "I'd known about Crowley ever since I was 12, when I had my spate of reading Dennis Wheatley occult paperbacks and being told that Aleister Crowley was the wickedest man in the world. There are references to Crowley in V for Vendetta." He also claims to be in touch with a demonic entity that is, quote, "highly skilled in mathematics and in the visual arts." Moore describes a similar experience of his own that mirrors the transformation that V went through as a result of practicing Crowley's Satanism when he opened up the door to possession by what he describes as a demonic entity. Moore stated, "I decided I was going to become a magician. All of a sudden the lightning bolt hit. It all got a bit strange. For a couple of months after that, I was looking back probably in some borderline schizophrenic state. I was very spaced out, God-struck. You babble for a while, babble like an idiot. I must have been unbearable for 2 or 3 months. I've integrated that now into the rest of my life." Moore not only admits to becoming demon-possessed after practicing Crowley's magic, but admits that his objective was to become a more effective writer. V for Vendetta is actually a diabolical propaganda film wherein Aleister Crowley's New World Order run by the Nietzschean Superman is outlined in his Satanic Manifesto, the Book of the Law. Alan Moore, who wrote V for Vendetta, both Wachowski movies, that both of these people claim to be possessed by spirit entities. Alan Moore actually calling his a demon. Like Dick, Keanu Reeves has claimed that he is used by demonic forces while acting. Reeves claims that he cannot act until the muse arrives, and that he takes what he refers to as, quote, demon rides, end quote. Director Taylor Hackford revealed that one of the reasons Keanu Reeves was chosen to play the lead role of Satan's son in The Devil's Advocate was because Keanu is, quote, a guy with lots of demons in him, and I was trying to tap and utilize that. Another example in which V is portrayed as the devil is that he introduces himself before he commits a murder with the first lines from the Rolling Stones song Sympathy for the Devil. "Please allow me to introduce myself. I am a man of wealth and taste." Notice that V is depicted in this caption at the end of his declaration as a devil with horns. V, as in several other places throughout V for Vendetta, reveals his identity as not just a satanic figure, but as Satan himself. Sympathy for the Devil is the first-person narrative in which the words leave no doubt as to who is supposed to be singing. The words are even more chilling when you realize that Keith Richards, who admitted to the Los Angeles Times that he's possessed by as many as 4 or 5 demons, and that the Stones songs are channeled through them and arrive in mass in the same way that a medium channels spirits at a seance. It does not take long to see what kind of spirits the Stones are channeling with songs like Sympathy for the Devil and albums like their Satanic Majesty's Request.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste.
Eve then says, "Are we going to do something or not?" V responds by quoting Aleister Crowley and saying, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Eve responds, "Quoting Aleister Crowley isn't good enough. It doesn't answer my question. I want to know what thou wilt, V."
George Lucas's Star Wars is another perfect example where not only have the characters been yanked out of real life, but the heroes and villains have been reversed. Take, for instance, Darth Vader, formerly Anakin Skywalker. This guy comes closer to Jesus Christ than any other non-Jesus character in the history of film. He was immaculately conceived, found by a wise man by the will of a supernatural force, declared the chosen one, prophesied to come, powerful magical abilities, wants to preserve life with his magical abilities, rejected by the temple leaders, storms the temple, becomes the leader of a large army, puts down a rebellion. If you're not with him, you're against him, and had a Swedish woman named Pernilla August play as your mother in a movie made in 1999. Pretty clear where George was going with this character. But it's not just Vader, Yoda too.
According to the Masonic reference works that you can get in any library, the Freemasonic Orders of Europe said that there was a little ideologue, a little spiritual entity that gave the knowledge to what the Masons call our hidden masters. That's what Freemasonry refers to those who lead world Freemasonry. They don't know who they are. No Freemason knows who the actual leaders of the world organization are. They call them our hidden masters. Well, according to the reference works, there is a little spiritual entity that guides the world Freemasonry, and they call him Yoda. And in the reference works, you'll see this little creature with the pointed ears, and he's called Yoda. Yoda goes back to Judah, or Judah, which goes back into British Israel World Freemasonry, going back to the time of the founding of England.
Now look at all the time it took me to convince you of all this. I'm not done editing yet, but this could easily end up being 40 minutes long. Now watch Hollywood tell you what I just did in 40 seconds.
I used to be an abstract.
Now I'm really confused.
I'm amused, stupid. Got a body, $50, and got sent out into the world to make my fortune. I used to specialize in entertainment. For example, I'm responsible for 19 of the 20 top grossing films of all time. Yeah, the one about the kid by himself in his house, burglars trying to come in and he fights them off. I had nothing to do with that one. Somebody sold their soul to Satan to get the grosses up on that piece of shit. Well, you remember why I left, right?
Because you were tired of doing all the work and getting none of the credit for your idea.
Understand this. Humanity, our very seed, is under attack. We are in a time of great revealing. Don't waste it. Tell your neighbors, friends, and family. Get the word out. And I'd like to thank guys like Alex Jones who are getting the word out, and guys like JFK who tried to get the word out. And now it's your turn. Good luck, and God help us all.